Well, Justin, today's a pretty exciting day. You know why?
It's not because it's my birthday, as much as that could be pretty exciting as well.
I would disagree, but it is a great day because we're talking about investment properties. And this is another episode of the Maximize Podcast. I'm Josh. This is Justin.
That's correct. I am Justin, and that is Josh.
And we're going to talk about investment properties today.
So let's do it. Okay, so I love the idea of investment properties for a number of reasons. Obviously, it's our niche, it's our area because it's real estate in general. But I think from everything that you see, there's obviously a lot of wealth in investment properties. Before we go too far, I'll say getting into investment properties is not going to be the same strategy for everyone. This is not like a one-size-fits-all shoe in the door type deal.
For sure.
So to that I say, there are lots of influencers that make lots of good points. Just because they make a good point does not mean that's what you should do. I
would concur.
And we'll leave it there because not trying to name names or say anybody's wrong, but it doesn't always fit every person.
Yeah. It's different for everyone. It was different for me. It's different for you. It's different for all those other people who have really big names and do a lot of great things.
They do a lot of great things.
Yeah.
So let me give you an example. And I won't use a name, but I think for me, if I got to start over again with where I'm at, if I'm single, I'm looking for a home, I have the ability to buy. If I'm starting this route, I am starting at this point, I would get a duplex or something, FHA, and I would buy it. And that's how I would start these days. And I know even those are expensive.
So what does that mean? So explain to them what you mean by a duplex FHA.
Good point. So if you want to buy an investment property, you are going to use a commercial loan. A commercial loan is a 15-year amortization that typically renews every 5. What does that mean? It means you get your loan for $100,000 and they break your payments down like you're going to pay it over 15 years. But every 5 years, your loan is technically done and they renew your contract. So interest rates go up. Your new contract goes up. Now your payments are structured like you're going to pay it off in 15 years, but you have to redo it every 5. An FHA loan is a mortgage loan. You cannot buy an investment property using a mortgage loan because a mortgage loan is for a primary residence, which means if you do that and you lie, you have committed mortgage fraud and tell no one or you're in deep, deep doo-doo.
Bad idea.
Very bad idea. So what I mean by FHA, and thank you for having me clarify that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not always on point every time I think.
Yeah.
It means I, as
definitely not like me.
No, I mean always on point Josh Cooper. He's not a doctor, folks, but he knows a lot.
Played one on TV once.
You're going to buy this investment property as your primary residence.
Yes.
Now, there are certain rules that go with that, but you can go up to a fourplex without making the rules too hairy. So you can buy a duplex, call it your primary residence, get your FHA mortgage loans, put a 30-year payment on that has a fixed interest rate. Yep. It's never going to fluctuate on you. And you're going to live in one, and you're going to rent the other.
And you can do it for as little as 3.5% down with the FHA loan.
Right. Where the commercial loan, if you're buying an investment property, right now it's 20 to 25% they're asking on a lot of these. Now, you may be able to have negotiated lower in the past or maybe even in the future, but they're pretty high right now. So I'm going to buy my first investment property with, if it's $100,000, $3,500 out of pocket, and I'm going to rent the other side, which is going to pay for my bills. And that's how I'm going to start. And I'm going to stay in there. I only have to be in there for a year, and then I can start looking for another primary residence and do that again.
It's pretty brilliant.
It is pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ways to do that. You can do investment properties by purchasing and living in the investment property. You could have, at one point, if you were finding a house that was a fixer-upper, you could have purchased that, put a 30-year mortgage on it, lived in it for 2 years, used your equity, like we talked about last year, and either kept the house or did a cash-out refi, and used the equity in what you had lived in as your primary residence. You could sell it and use it tax-free, or you could take the equity line out and buy another house to live in as a primary residence and a rental, both with the extra equity. So there's ways to build that I didn't do right when I started. Did I lose you?
Wow.
I'm talking...
that is so everything you're saying is completely correct. So, what Justin's saying is completely correct. If you're anything like me, that's just a lot of information. That's just a lot of information to kind of try to consume, right? So,
good point. So we think differently.
Very much
I'm
so.
more of like a numbers straightforward,
if you couldn't
like,
tell,
make it work type person. So how does you knowing the same things that I know, how do we make this for the people who think like you?
Great question. You call your favorite realtor. You say, "Help me out." No, it's so. One of the great things about this is if you're trying to do what Justin was suggesting, buy your first primary or buy your first duplex in investment property, you can get in it for 3.5% down. And let's say it's $100,000, and let's say your mortgage on that $100,000 with taxes and insurance is going to be, let's say, roughly $600 a month. You can absolutely, I would assume, unless it's just a dilapidated property, which probably wouldn't pass FHA appraisal anyway.
Right.
But so assuming it's in decent condition that would pass FHA, it's going to rent for at least $600 a month, I would think, unless it's some sort of anomaly.
Sure.
Right. So just a net wash right there of you are basically living rent free. Someone else is paying your mortgage. You're covering your your taxes, insurance, and maybe some utilities. And I'm sure, with a duplex, the right duplex, you can have the tenant pay some of those as well.
But my insurance or taxes are probably escrowed.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So if my all-in escrow payment to my mortgage is $600 a month and I rent it for $600, as long as the utilities are split, I am literally just paying for internet, electric, and gas every month.
Yeah. So the beauty is, you're living with just paying your utilities, most likely, and your mortgage is getting paid down. And so, you get to a point where, like if that's your entry level, if that's your entry point into investment properties, you can obviously use the equity in that house later to go buy additional things.
And it's very low risk for you.
Very low risk. And so, like you can get to, like there's obviously so many different things that you can look at when you're looking for investment properties. I know kind of like the general overall school of thought is something called a 1% rule.
Yes. Yep.
So it's basically, for instance, if you're buying a property, let's say a $200,000 property that you want to use as an investment property, 1% of $200,000, it's your initial upfront cost to purchase this house. So $200,000, you should be getting at least 1% rent
of the purchase price.
That
would be your goal. If you can do better than that,
yes,
and you aren't in a place with insane taxes.
Yeah.
Obviously, insanely high taxes are going to throw off how those numbers work out.
Yeah.
It's going to change your mortgage and your commercial loan, what you're going to pay in. But yeah, absolutely. If you buy it $200,000 and the rent is $2,000 a month, you've hit your 1% rule.
Yeah. So that's and that's kind of the prevailing school of thought, right? So it's like that's kind of like your base standard minimum. I'm going to look for this 1% rule, right? So obviously everything on top of that is great, So there are deals like that out there off and on all the time. It just depends on who like the networking that you're doing and how you're trying to source the deals. But I don't know.
Well, I mean, you and I are trying to grow this ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to grow an additional rental portfolio. One, we want it for ourselves and for our families. Two, we want to have something to offer to our agents in-house to be able to grow their wealth outside of active deals that are being made. And so if we're looking at this, how do you, someone who maybe is not into real estate at all, if you want to get your foot in the door, here's some things that I would want you to do, because not everyone is a handyman.
True.
Not everyone wants to handle evictions, finding tenants. Like there's a lot that's involved in it. Mm-hmm. So I would say if I am looking at this, I want to make sure if I am working the math that I can afford in those numbers to still walk away okay with hiring a property manager.
Yeah, absolutely.
That gets my hands off the doing things actively. Another thing that I would want to do is I would want to make sure the numbers make sense for me to be putting 3 to 5% away every month for maintenance.
Yeah.
Now, I know if we're looking in this market, it's going to be pretty tough competitively to be able to purchase something and factor in all those additional costs and still come out up front. Because if that's possible, everybody's getting on it.
Yes.
But it's not impossible.
Correct. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And like we are in that process of trying to do those. Obviously being in the business, I would assume it's probably a little easier for us to kind of find those deals. Maybe
it is, but just little secret to anyone watching, we don't have a magic code for finding them.
No, we don't at all. No, it just
people aren't calling us with this huge list of below market things saying like, hey, I want you guys to do this because I feel like I'd rather not have money and I'd let you guys buy it for nothing.
Yeah.
Like that never happens.
Yeah. So occasionally you'll find someone that that has a property that they're just done with, life circumstances happen and they just, and they're just ready to walk away. They just want to cash out and be done. And those are generally, like those are few and far between.
They're rare, but that's how I got my first
Yeah.
couple is the properties were in an estate. They were both owned by the same owner. They were both back to back on a street and they had been listed for a while. And I offered half, no joke, half. This is a long time. This is not this market. Just in case anybody was wondering, that was not this market. Offered half. It was sitting in a state. The kids were out of state, and they just wanted to be done.
Yeah.
So sometimes things happen, but that's rare, but it does happen.
Yeah. And so there are so many different resources that you could look at on like it. If you want more information on things like this, one of the good places that I first started was a resource called Bigger Pockets. Mm-hmm. Bigger Pockets has a podcast. Their website's amazing. They have a lot of great resources there. One thing that some of their guys do, and which is pretty prevalent in the investment property, is what they refer to as BRRRR properties. Mm-hmm. So BRRRR properties is BRRRR. So there's 4 R's. What it stands for is you buy it, you rehab it, you rent it, then you refinance it, and then you repeat it.
Right.
So why do you do that, Justin?
So why you do it specifically, and then why you do it maybe in that order.
Yes, exactly. So why you do it in that order? Because that order is important.
The order is important, but one of the reasons why you would buy rehab and then refi is you're buying it with a certain number of money down. A lot of people, if they can do it, they'll find a private financer so they can buy it, quote unquote, cash. They'll rehab it with someone else's cash. And then when they refinance what has been updated, the 80% of that value hopefully covers everything they put into it. And now they get their money back. So now they have...
So they've gained equity with the rehab.
They've gained equity with the rehab. Yep. So now that they have refinanced that property, now their loan on that property or their note against that property is the only thing they have, and they now own it without any money out of pocket. Mm-hmm. But you have to do it in that specific order.
Correct.
And one of the other important things with that order is notice they rent it before they refi it. They prove that it is a viable investment source to the bank, not only with how the house now looks, but now that it can receive an active tenant and make monthly payments, and then they refinance it.
Yeah. And people do this all across the world, right? So it is a proven viable business if it's done right. So you have to have the right margins, you have to have the right equity in order to do this, mm-hmm. right? Because there runs a chance of you're not going to be able to get your money back out of it, or all of your money back out of it.
Yeah, and so transparency. You may not believe this, but Josh and I do not have loaded pockets. We have no hidden mansion in LA. We do not vacation to our private bungalows in Hawaii. So we were looking at a property to purchase.
Not yet, anyway.
Yeah, not yet. So we were looking at a property to purchase for an investment, and our thing was we were not in a place where we wanted to have a large chunk of funds out of pocket. We didn't want to do the 20%, so we were looking into a private investment to get it. And the problem with doing that at that time was coming up with what we thought as real estate professionals where the value at the end of it would be. And we weren't sure the value at the end of it would give us the 80% loan to value
and what that's called,
pay off the private equity.
And that's called ARV, so after repaired value. So if you've heard that term, ARV is after repaired value. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's not ARV. It's not like an offshoot of a pirate saying.
Yeah. Could be.
And we could make it that way.
Yeah.
So again, it wasn't in a position for us. It could be perfect for someone else. For us, that specific one was not going to work to a place where we were comfortable financial, because then we had to also factor in property management and a few other things. Mm-hmm. So that just brings us back to the fact that it is a viable source of income, and it could be a good investment for someone, but just because someone is bragging about a good investment or a good investment strategy does not mean you have to do that specific thing. Mm-hmm. If you don't want to be a landlord, then you need to make sure you factor in the gap to have a property manager so that you don't have to. Mm-hmm. Now, I think you can pursue becoming a real estate investor, and it may be slower for you. If I had to say this, and maybe you'd agree, I'd say your first couple are probably going to be your hardest to get your head wrapped around.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's the biggest sacrifice before you get into it. You don't really understand your numbers. It probably gets tough from that point. But I think after you have a couple, it can get a little easier.
Yeah, I think just like anything in life, the first date with your wife is always the...
No, it was great.
Was it?
Yeah, you're not catching me on that one.
What?
No blackmail happening here.
Oh my gosh.
Good try. I love you, honey.
He does. You got anything else on investment properties?
No, I don't. I mean, I think that's a pretty good overarching picture. I think it can be for everyone. I think it's different for every individual, but it's something that we like to talk about.
Yeah.
So I think if you have questions or you're looking to get into that game, we would love to sit down with you. So please feel free to reach out. Zach will make sure our information flashes on the screen there. So if you want to set up an appointment either on the phone, Zoom, or in the office right here in front of this great TV, you can go ahead and do that. Josh and I would be excited to start that journey with you.
Yeah, and this is a really big concept. It's impossible to get everything together in a 15-minute podcast, right? So
unless you want to have an angry voice and pretend like you're always right and tell people what they should do.
Yeah, so there's so many different resources out there. Just like Justin said, we'd love to chat with you if you do have any questions. Other than that, I think we're out.
We're out.
Maximize Podcast out.